Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're in my basement again. I'm going to be showing you why I like the Rheem and Ruud furnaces so much and why I think if you're a homeowner, you should be installing a Rheem furnace in your own house, and if you're a contractor, you should be installing these for your customers. Now for the sake of the video, I'm just going to refer to them as Rheems. This is a Ruud, but the parts are all interchangeable. They're exactly the same, at least on the R96 and the U96. So right off the bat, the overall build quality of these are just awesome. I'm going to be using a Goodman furnace to compare, and I have nothing against Goodman. They're an okay furnace, but you know pretty quick when you're looking at something a little higher quality. So right off the bat, you have these nice latches here to get into the furnace. Turn the two latches and you're in. Just pull the door off and away you go. On a Goodman, you're dealing with 5/16 screws, and the doors are just flimsy. So as soon as you get this in your hand, you can just see it's a lot nicer quality. You have a nicely reinforced door here, cast aluminum latches. It just makes getting in and out of this thing a breeze. You don't need tools. You're not struggling with this flimsy little door. And they're thicker. They're thicker material. They insulate against sound a lot better, so you don't hear the inducer motor coming on, stuff like that. So inside the top door of the furnace, a couple things I like. The flame sensor is right in the front of the burner tray there on the Goodmans, and some other furnaces, Luxairs, similar furnaces, they're in the bottom here. So you've got to reach in the back, use a stubby little nut driver to get that out. I like on these, they're just front and center. I also like that the drain trap is in the top cabinet. It doesn't hang through the bottom of the divider to get in front of the blower wheel if you have to pull the squirrel cage, pull the blower for any reason. So that's another perk. The other thing I like is the spark ignition. There's no HSI on these, so it's just spark ignition. It comes on, it works great. I've never actually seen one of these R96 sparkers fail. You know, typical Goodmans, Luxairs, you get 4 or 5, maybe 6 years out of an HSI. They crack, you got to go out there and replace it, which is good for service. You make a little money there, but to keep the customer happy, these spark ignitions are just great. They don't need any maintenance. I've never seen one fail. Another thing I like about these is every hole that goes into that black collector box, your collector tray, every hole has a brass insert inside of it. So when you're taking stuff like the drain off, and you go to put it back in, there's really no risk of stripping out a hole because all of these holes have these nice brass inserts. I'd pop that out, but I only have one hand. But all the mounts for the venter motor, everything that goes into that collector box has an insert, and it just stops the collector box from getting stripped out and kind of leaving you in a tough spot. Now, another thing I like, now that both doors are off, is this reinforcement right across here. You have this nice, thick, sturdy reinforcement. These are very strong. When you get like a Luxair or Carrier, these are so flimsy that at times you'll put the door on and these actually push back before the door switch is engaged, and that can cause you a callback right there. So that's a nice feature. The other main thing I like about this furnace is the board. Now, this is only on the R96 and the U96, which is the highest sort of trim, if you will. It does not come on the R95s. I like this style thermostat wire connector. You can pop that out, put a jumper in there really quick if you're just trying to test the heat. I also like the display here, so it'll always tell you what mode it's in. Right now it's just in fan. If it's in heat, you'll see an H, a lowercase h for low stage, uppercase H for second stage, and that little button down there is a really handy tool for setup. So you press that once, you'll see FL. Now FL is a fault log. There's a couple code 26s in there from my other video when I was trying to run this on a portable power station. So that will show you up to a week of fault logs, the last week's worth of time. Whereas on a Goodman or a Carrier, you just get the last 5 to 10 faults. You don't know when they happened, if they're relevant at all while you're at the call. So I like that this only stores 1 week of codes. You know this happened within the last 7 days. Now the next one is AF. Obviously that's your airflow. I'm just running a continuous fan right now, 500 CFM, but that's very handy in air conditioning. When you're setting up the condenser, you want to make sure you have the right CFM for your outdoor unit, so that's a super handy feature. You just press it once and you know right away that you are set for 2 tons, 2.5, 3 tons, whatever it may be. It also has the firing rate, so right now it's off. It'll say low or high. It's pretty easy to tell. You don't really need that feature, but it's there. And then unit information, 56 is 56,000 BTUs. They round up to 60. They call it a 60K. So that is the spark ignition right there, that orange wire going up to the top of the cabinet. These boards have a pretty low failure rate. The only time I see them fail is when they get wet, so can't really blame the board for that. I haven't changed too many out other than for that reason. One more nice thing about this board is this single board here fits on all R96 furnaces, no matter what size they are. So that little chip right there is the memory card. You pop that out, and that goes into the new board. You don't have to, worry about getting the right size board for the furnace. Okay, so here we are on the Goodman furnace. This is a little GMVC 40,000. This is a good furnace. Again, I'm not knocking Goodman. If you gave me a choice between a Goodman and a Carrier, I'd put a Goodman in my house before a Carrier. But these are the little differences I'm talking about. So you have this little door here. This is one of my biggest gripes on the Goodmans is just these flimsy little doors, little thumb screws. The older ones had 5/16, but these are a thumb screw. And yeah, I mean, you can just see they're just real thin gauge. They're pretty flimsy, but it's a furnace. You're not that worried about the doors. This one does have the nicer circuit board. Like I said, this is the GMVC, so it's got that same thermostat connector. It does have a little self-diagnostic there. But like I said, you have to remove the call for heat, push the fault recall button. It'll give you the last 5 or 10 codes, but it won't tell you really when they happened. It's just the last 5 or 10 recorded. Could be up to a year ago, 2 years ago, doesn't really specify. So I do like that about the Rheem, that it's only the last week of calls. Here's the drain trap. So if you're going to pull the blower out, you do have to remove the drain trap, which again, not a huge deal. This one's pretty easy to service. It's not like a Carrier where it snaps through the tray. These ones are pretty easy to take off, but it's one extra step if you're just pulling the blower. And here's one more thing I like about the Rheems. This is what I mentioned earlier. So all these screws for the venter motor are just right into the collector box. They're just right into the plastic right back here. There's no brass insert. So if you pull this motor off a couple times, those holes can start to get pretty tired. They get a little stripped out, and eventually you're going to strip them. You're going to have to replace that whole collector box, which it's a Goodman. You're probably going to have to replace it at some point anyway, because they all tend to leak. But that's just one more thing that I like about the Rheem. Aside from that, like I said, pretty good furnace. It's a Fasco motor, White Rogers gas valve. I mean, basically the same parts, but just the little quirks between each manufacturer. Some of them are a little more technician friendly, and that's what makes the Rheem really stick out in my mind. There's the flame sensor. Like I said, it's kind of up in the bottom. Once again, not a huge deal, but I do like the ones that are in the front of the tray. They just go in and they 90 up. Makes it a little easier to service. And my third and final gripe about the Goodman is this door switch. If you've ever pushed one of these just to test a couple of things, you'll know that pushing that door switch, it sounds like you just put 120 volts straight to ground. It's a pretty good spark. I've actually had customers ask me if that was normal before, and yeah, it is. They all do that. So that's the last complaint I have. Now, you always hear it, no matter what product you use, there's always someone out there that's had a bad experience. So I will go over a couple of the common issues on this furnace. I would say the number one are these two pressure switches right here. These are just your cheap Costa Rica pressure switch. So most common call I get on these is a faulty switch. It'll be pulling vent pressure, everything's fine in the vent system, but the switch, it's not making connection. It is physically closing, but it's not allowing voltage to pass. And it's just the contacts inside the switch are cheap, they get dirty or they get pitted and they're making a poor connection. So I would say that's the number one cause for no heat calls on this furnace. The other one is, I didn't put that screw back in yet, but this water sensor. Over time, the water can actually penetrate the sensor and get into those little terminals right there. And since it is condensate, it's pretty acidic, so it'll leave like a rust. It'll sort of eat up the terminals in there, and basically it'll make a poor connection, and you'll throw a code 58 down here for water circuit open. So I would say those are the two biggest issues on this furnace. Other than that, these things are really solid. This is a 2018. I've had it since obviously it was new. I've never had an issue with it. I haven't had a single fault code other than stuff I've done myself when I was messing around. So it's been very reliable. The heat exchangers in these are great. This model in particular has been out since 2013. I've never seen a failed heat exchanger, due to a rust or a crack, anything like that. So again, really solid. So let me know in the comments what you think of Rheem or Ruud, if you've had a bad experience with them, what your thoughts are even after watching this video. Everyone has their brand. Everyone sort of has a horror story with one furnace or another. So like I said, I'm not knocking on Goodman's at all. I think they're an okay furnace, but for the price, I would much sooner go with a Rheem, a Ruud. I just think they're a little better quality, and this one's never let me down. So let me know what you think, let me know your brand, and let me know if you'd put one of these in your house. Thanks for watching.